This is Chris Jansen. I'm with the End Evil podcast. End Evil podcast was created to help people imagine a reality that's not full of evil, like the way we're living in the world today. I'm trying to reach out to people who understand and care about the importance of freedom and the importance of truth and the importance of caring for other human beings and individuals. And on that note, I brought today a guest, Catherine Waters, who I've been coming to respect, learning her work, and got to meet her recently. And the roundtable, she showed up and had really wise words to share. So thanks so much for joining me, Catherine.
Yeah, I mean, me, all I've like paid attention to and studied and like was literally just silenced for speaking about all of my life was relationship skills, abusive relationships, dysfunctional relationships, how healthy relationships were supposed to work, just trying to get people to acknowledge the like blatant dysfunction that was pretty much like in your face. And I mean, it's so simple, really, that like you know, I knew something was really, really wrong, and that people, there was just something wrong. Like something was really, really wrong. Like, and I hate to be and sound so like offensive or like I'm being like derogatory to people, but there's just no other way of saying it. Like you have to be able to speak the truth and to point out something that is just so wrong in order to change it and move in a better direction. And that's what people
Right.
just never wanted to do. I mean, it was one thing, to grow up like shit, but then it was another when you point it out and you tell people. Of course, the ones that are doing it are not going to really care that much, but even other people, and instead of listening to you and then taking steps in another direction or to change, they basically do the exact opposite and just they'll go into what I just call like psychological debt. Like people will literally go into like mental debt just so they don't have to acknowledge reality.
yeah,
So they'll just,
I know what you're talking about.
instead of, right, so instead of financial debt people are getting into, they're getting into like a literal health debt. People are literally like they have been in a physical and psychological and spiritual health deficit and perpetuating that just to not acknowledge the reality. And then that would have been too uncomfortable, and then people would have had to really rethink this system and challenge the people in power and start doing something different like decades ago. And that was just unheard of in people's minds, like challenging the system, challenging the people in power, holding people in power accountable. Like that was not even a consideration when it actually have been, this is our right to do. I mean, so it was obvious that there was just something like literally physically and medically wrong with the people's thought processes, and like adult people just didn't know their rights, didn't exercise their rights, didn't know that they had any rights. And they were basically like trying to do the same thing to me and get me to acquiesce. And
You
my
just never would have it, huh?
I mean, like, I give my body the credit. I mean, I really do. I give God, nature, and the way he just makes your body, like, because it was my body that just did it. My body was just having these natural responses. It wasn't anything that I had to think about intellectually. It's like when all this talk today now again about the COVID and the vaccines, and people are talking all about like people are having adverse responses, allergic responses to these vaccines. So what are you going to do? Say to those people, oh, it's right, your body is wrong. I mean, that's what they're going to do. They're going to literally like, oh, well, this one had this uh, injury or immunocompromise already. So it wasn't our vaccine, it was that person. I mean, and that's what people literally did to me, like since I was a child. And it was like, it was like there was something wrong with me. I mean, it's like, it's so astonishing um, that people are willing to throw like healthy young people under the bus. And I mean, everything that I say, like I get a little bit afraid that people are not going to believe me because I mean, nobody ever took it seriously all of these decades. um
I get that. I mean, like this in this last year is the first time that I've met quite a few other people that know what I'm talking about. I really was getting to the point where I was kind of like, for years it's like I'm not crazy. I know what I'm talking about, and but it finally kind of getting to the point where maybe I am crazy because I'm the only one saying this stuff. But then now I'm starting to find more other minds that are talking about the stuff you're talking about. Like I have so much to reflect on already in just such a short time. So
I mean, I got to tell you, it's so unusual for me to like, to have people actually understand what I'm saying, value what I say, validate what I say, because I mean, I'm not getting any younger. I mean, I got a birthday, unfortunately, coming up this weekend, and I lived a really, really long time with the people right around you that are supposed to love and protect you more than anybody in the world, doing the exact opposite and treating you like you're, like there's something wrong with you. And I mean, I got to tell you, it has been one heck of a, like literally for 5 decades of just doing everything and anything that in my power to hold on to, what was left of your health, your sanity, what you knew, what I saw, what I know I saw, what I know I felt. People were always trying to pull the rug out from under that. And I fully believe that the family system, and now I just call it the family industrial complex, just like the military industrial complex and every other industrial complex, that I mean, exactly, like the family has been so destroyed, it's been so diluted, it's been so polluted, poisoned, broken apart. And
it's bigger than just the family too. Is that something I've reflected on all these years is because I've always kind of been enamored or intrigued by like native cultures, especially to this country. People were here before settlers came, and they weren't all perfect. They all had their problems, but there was something very valuable about indigenous cultures where there's like a community, right? And there's like different age levels, and the kids play with the grandparents, and everybody kind of at night goes to a fire or something. And sometimes I felt that little glimpses of that in life, like at church camp or something, when we went to the fire and we ate at the mess hall and we worked together on chores. But most people aren't experiencing any of that growing up. And you'd be lucky even if you get a family to sit together for dinner, especially these days with the screens. But in my childhood, I was lucky to have a mother and father who were there the whole time and pretty supportive. But there were so many problems and issues and dysfunctional aspects of my family. How about what was your family like growing up?
ugh, well, I know I've tried to like talk about it for so long. Like, I mean, they basically just got married, because it was against the Catholic Church to have an abortion. And you could feel. I mean, it's me and my brother who's 16 months older than me. I was born in 64, he was born in 62. And by the 70s, the early 70s, when I was like 6, I was really just becoming so conscious. There was domestic violence. I know that my mom, like, I don't think either one of my parents really wanted to be a parent. Again, like, they just had kids because it was against the Catholic Church to have an abortion, and you can just feel that you were not wanted, that it was just this, like, they weren't going to really step up to the plate and, to do, the right job. And the environment that I grew up in was just so unhealthy. And my body was just having all of these stress responses to the domestic violence as a child. My parents got divorced, I think, by the time I was about like 5 or 6. Something like that. I think about, let me see, how old could I have been?
It's pretty
Maybe
striking to a young person right away to see that, like, a bad example, right? Like two adults that can't get along, who supposedly made a promise to get along, and now they're doing a terrible job at it.
you
Right
know.
away, it's a bad example, right? Like a lot of parents
So that's what I mean. Like, so I try to, like, plant the seed in people's minds, that the family system, like, this is pollution. It's literal pollution, abuse and domestic violence and not being wanted. A child is not stupid. People treat you like you're stupid. They treat you, because you're vulnerable, like you're stupid, and that they could do whatever they want to you. And somehow, like, your body just isn't going to notice. And it was really, like, telling how, smart the body is, and how it just, like, responds, like, boom, to things, and just expose, the hell out of, the people in power, like, for what they really were. And instead of them, saying, thank you for making me aware of that. If they were even moderately healthy people, that's what they would have been saying. And then, taking steps to change and doing everything and anything they could, to protect you, and not let the bill and the pollution fall on you. But literally everyone, including some neighbors and other people around, they were making it normal. They made it normal, like, and almost like they had a right to dump their stuff on you, to put
on
their bill.
children, right?
Yeah.
Like the most innocent. The way I most relate to that was for me is school. I had a, like, kind of like you're saying, like a physical and mental rejection of school at a pretty young age. I started feeling like a rebel, like I wanted to push back, and I didn't understand back then why I was so angry. But I remember even at like maybe 10 or 11 talking about ageism. I used to call it ageism because I noticed how people talked about sexism, and I'm like, no, people treat me different just because of my age, because I'm younger. But I can
Yeah.
tell oftentimes that I'm more mature than a lot of these adults. And in
Yeah.
school, it was frankly obvious to me so many times that these people who were making up all these rules weren't even didn't even have the right to be doing that to me. And they really, a lot of them, I didn't feel like they were mature enough human beings.
Yeah.
I felt like I was more mature at my 10,
Yeah.
11, 12-year-old self. And I think I was.
Yeah.
Because back then I
Absolutely.
understood freedom better than they did. Now I get it. Now I get why. It's because they had no concept of freedom. And somehow inherently, even though I didn't know mentally and consciously like I do now, I knew from like deep down that it wasn't right for them to be hindering our natural abilities.
They really are not adults. They really are, like, I just consider people to be like genetically modified adults. Because this system is so anti-nature, it is such at war with nature and health. And most people, when they grow, get what they need, through the stages of development. Like, when you're a child, and you need certain needs to be met through the different stages. And if you don't get them in that the healthy amount that, nature, your physical and emotional and spiritual health require, which I don't believe most people do. By the time you get to adulthood, you're like, really a child, and not a mature, healthy adult. Mark Passio is always talking about being order followers. I mean, if there's one, characteristic that is so obvious that there's something wrong with people and their adult children, it's that, that it became normal to just be an order follower all of your life, when that is just such a glaring sign of disease and immaturity and, irresponsibility, and that you just are like an adult child who's just going to have people in power over you all of your life. And I became so obsessed, like so early, with studying like child abuse, the abusive family system, relationship skills. Like how, it was so obvious that not just myself, but even people around me, even neighbors and friends and people who I thought like grew up like so much better than me, and yet nobody was being raised to self-actualize, like to reach your healthy potential, to be the unique, authentic person that you're meant to be in this world, and then, heaven forbid, get paid to be that person, to bring, just something original and unique, and to be able to stand on your own 2 feet. And the cord should get cut eventually, and you shouldn't always be, dependent on the system. And as I got older, in the 80s, early to mid 80s, and you're going out to work and all of this stuff, it just it became so clear that the workplace, the work environment was just this other extension of the dysfunctional abusive family system. And, you were just going to have a job and, and not again, get to really bring your unique thoughts or ideas or grow.
Or purpose, for that matter, to find your true purpose, like I was saying, like in a more Aboriginal culture, there would have been this process of, when you get to 13, where you had to do some sort of feat, to sort of prove yourself, or go out in the wild and spend a couple of days by yourself to find out who you are and find your secret name or whatever, rites of passage, in modern days that's lost. It just occurred to me recently, like I was having memories of elementary school, and I'm like, why was it such a big deal for them to always make us stand in a straight line? They were so militant about that straight line thing, And I mean, I get organizations one thing, but it was another thing there. It was all about control. It was about everybody doing the same thing at the same time and being in this line. And that's so much the thinking, the indoctrination we got through these things we go to, these school indoctrination systems. And then, like you're saying, right into the workforce with the cubicles. It's like people are very conditioned to stand in a line and to be another pod in the row, and that's the opposite of creativity and imagination, that we want to encourage, right?
Yeah, I mean, it really is like kind of, sad, to say the least, how indoctrinated people get, how much their uniqueness gets destroyed and encouraged to be like this cog in the wheel. And again, like I can't help but just kind of like talk about the current, COVID / like vaccine situation that we're in. And I mean, again, like I feel like it's so obvious, how much this system has gone against the way that nature works, and how like, corporations and bankers and all of these institutions that were literally in existence, God knows how long before we even arrived on this earth. And they have all of this like leverage and all of this power. They pretty much own the entire world. And we get treated like we're, like if we're lucky, if we get to be a guest on this earth, and they just keep getting larger and larger and larger, and the average person doesn't even get to reach what is even within their healthy size and healthy amount to be. And then we're here, and all we're doing is serving them and helping them to get even bigger and bigger. And when the hell do we get to grow? I mean, it was just so obvious. Like early on, I'm like, what the fuck is going on around here? Like, I want to freaking be something. Like, I need the leverage. I need, like help and support so I can at least reach the amount, my healthy size, and take up my rightful amount of space in this world. And the people I was around, I mean, I'm talking about everybody, like, relatives, neighbors, all through the decades. Like, so many people are just so unaware of how unconsciously ingrained it is in them to treat, the people right around them, that, you just wanting to be your healthy self is like somehow like a crime, and you're a criminal, or you're the excessive one, while, oh yeah, but, corporations and bankers and, Satanists are like taking over the whole world. So it's like they get away with it. Nobody stands up to them. No, there's no resistance for them. But it's like, oh, like, I assert myself. I want my rightful elbow room. I want my rightful, room to, feel my healthy feelings. And I'm the one, that gets treated like a criminal.
Have you ever driven one of those cars where it only goes so fast? Like, you could push the pedal as hard as you can, and it only gets up to whatever 75 miles an hour, and it won't go any faster. And they call that device a governor, because it governs the speed, And that's basically what these governors have been doing, is dampening our ability to be human in the most basic way. And all of politics, really, and government and religions, they're all different ways of governing us in ways that we really don't even need to be governed. It's totally ridiculous and excessive. I've never used so many words as I have in the past year, like asinine, ridiculous, just absolutely inconceivable, things I would have formerly thought of being unconceivable. But like you're pointing out, we've kind of sensed this gradual frustration our whole lives in different ways. I'm curious for you, feeling those feelings you're describing throughout your life, of being dampened and governed, and people not letting you be your true self. How have you continued to find inspiration and break through that and keep being yourself despite the overwhelming barrage of authoritarianism and statism and dampening of the human kind? How do we stay bright and be light for other people? What have you learned?
Well, again, I'm just going to go back to how the body works. Because unfortunately, when I got to be a teenager, living with, a single parent who really was, I completely felt like they were trying to, kill me and diminish me. And, again, like my body would just have these like normal responses and just stand up to, speak truth back to the abuser. Again, my body just did it automatically. And I had no choice but to spend at least 5, if not even more, years doing that. And I don't know necessarily if it did me any good. It gave me some strength. It gave me like a lot of knowing. I just knew that I was right, even though no one around me would acknowledge it, even though, the abusive parent like wouldn't even really acknowledge it. But because I was, getting older and I was a teenager, and the abuser couldn't bully me anymore. So, like I could feel that the only reason why I was making some headway is because I was physically bigger. You know, like I don't even know if it was so much of what I was saying, you know, was right, as much as it was the fact that I have more leverage, and they couldn't bully you anymore, you know. And so, yeah, I mean, you know, right, like right it was nothing in, you know, for me it was ever about right. It was always about, you know, who had the power. You know, like it was always like a might made right system. Whether you were right or wrong, if you had the leverage and the power, that was it. And you know, most people around me, since I was a child, they all made excuses for the abuser, you know. And so the abuser in power always got perpetuated, you know, through the decades. No matter what, you know, they never had to apologize. They never had to take responsibility. They never had to admit they did anything wrong or they did any harm or take any steps to change. And, you know, and they just kept getting away with it, you know, like year after year, decade after decade. And, you know, and, you know, right, like you were just automatically wrong because you were in the low level position. So, you know, again, it was obvious things weren't about, you know, right or wrong. It wasn't about having respect. It wasn't about, you know, protecting vulnerable people so that they grew, you know, and could be, you know, healthy people when they grew. You know, it was about, you know, you were like a subordinate, like you just automatically had no rights, automatically had no like value, what, you know, whatsoever. I mean, like, and like these are just like all kind, you know, ways that the people have been so indoctrinated, you know, within the family system, you know, all throughout the decades. And if they don't challenge it, if they don't question these things, then I mean, I'm surrounded by people that I know, you know, who basically like they have these same attitudes that they've had for decades, and they still have them to this day. Like they never challenge the, you know, the conditioning that comes in the family system, like ever.
You're just hitting on something that for me it's kind of like one of the fundamentals I came up with. You know, in trying to realize all these problems in the world, you know, and listening to what on earth is happening, I finally got the juice in me to start making these presentations. And when I first started trying to do that, it really got me thinking about like, where do I start? You know, like what's the first thing I want to talk about? And so what I keyed in on is what you were just saying is the idea of value. Like I really, the more I've thought about it, I think the large majority of people don't understand their value. And that's a big part of the problem is that we start, like you're describing, children are getting devalued really, really early and treated as if they're not valuable in so many ways. Think about this. A politician can write some words on a piece of paper, and those words are more valuable than hundreds of human lives. You know, they can write these words down and pass them around in these political circles, and those could represent hundreds of human lives that they're tossing around. And the words on their paper in this society are more important than those human lives and souls connected to them. And we could think of countless examples of ways that humans are devalued and treated like they're not worthy. So, I mean, I think the key here is to try to bring that value back to people and try to explain. But how do you explain to someone? This is what I struggle with. How do you explain to someone what their value is? I mean, you obviously kind of just had this deep within knowing where no one told you and you just kept feeling it. It's like what you're describing. But how do we communicate that to others? How do we inspire, you know, maybe our younger self to realize this value? I mean, how do we explain it? You got any ideas? I mean, it's something I still struggle with.
You know, like, I mean, I wish I had a good answer to that question because, I mean, I tried to get people to be more empowered, you know, to want more for themselves, to have, you know, just like a better quality of life, to reach their healthy potential, to be like more successful. and to just overall like want more and be more, and especially just like health and fitness, because and psychological health, it was just obvious people didn't, they were just so ignorant to psychological health, like emotional health, and what it meant to really reach one's full like capacities, like just psychologically and emotionally. And it was just like obvious that that could only come from the family system. I mean, if you think of like the way that we grow fruits and vegetables, I mean, it comes from nature. Like it has to grow a certain way under certain conditions, to get like really healthy, like fruit and vegetables, I mean, like human beings are just like no different. Like you have to get things, from family, from parents, like healthy, parents, and just, and be cultivated like a certain way, farmed a certain way, if you will, I mean, because I see like, people that grew up like fairly well, they have a much more innate self-worth, self-confidence than, again, I could just speak about the people that I grew up around, this like kind of really uneducated working class people who end up just turning out and growing up, just like their parents and being working class and just having some kids and stuff like that. And I never wanted to be that. And I always like wanted to be more, and like, wanted to be educated, wanted to be successful, wanted to be creative. I definitely wanted to travel, and I wanted to make money on my terms, being what I wanted to be in this world. And I guess it was because, early in life, my body knew, to challenge the person in power, to question the person in power, the people in power, and to just, speak back to them, and just know stuff, it just, like my body just did it by itself. Like I didn't really have to think about it, it was just like an automatic thing. And that's how I just knew like something was wrong. But then, when other people and neighbors, like nobody stepped up to the plate, like nobody was on the side of the most vulnerable. Nobody. I mean, I literally had to do, everything myself. And it's like this, something was definitely wrong. Like I could have understood if, your parents had issues, they had problems, and they couldn't really, give you what you needed. But there's no excuse for the fact that even like extended family or neighbors or some, other adults did not step in and just give an innocent child like the support, the mentoring, like the guidance and stuff, that you just absolutely require, when you're a child. And like no one did that. I mean, like people just did the exact opposite, and they made excuses for the abusers in power, and they basically treated your body like your body can just afford all of this stuff. Like they treat, it was so amazing, like how, like literally everybody that I was surrounded by, just turned the whole situation and flipped it backwards, and treated me like I was somehow an adult, like my body was an adult that could just afford all of this stuff that people were doing to you, rather than seeing and acknowledging that your body was being so adversely harmed by what people were doing. I mean, they just acted like, oh, no big deal, just get over it. And as the decades went by, people were always acting like the abuse was in the past, and like you're just going to get over it. They kind of took for granted, without taking any action or doing anything about it, doing anything to actually change anything. And they just kind of took for granted, like you're just getting away from the abuse. Like the abuse was just, in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, like in the 70s. And like the larger system or country was not like that. But meanwhile, but nobody, stepped in to do anything. Like no one did anything to change it. So their words would say, oh, it's in the past, or oh, let it go, or oh, get over it. But their actions were doing the exact opposite. And they were literally, bailing out the abuser, enabling the abuser, criminalizing the vulnerable, and just perpetuating the same vicious cycle decade after decade after decade after decade. And I tried like hell on my own, to break this cycle, to try to get people to see what they were doing, like how hard, could it have been to try to, get people to realize, children need healthy environments to grow up in, or there's going to be lasting consequences. Like this stuff doesn't just go away. It doesn't just, you don't just get over it, especially if nobody helps you, especially if people don't even acknowledge it or take steps to do anything to change it. There was a clear mind-body disconnect. I just call it like, people like are like literally decapitated, and they live completely from the neck up, and completely removed from the neck down. Like, and this is how I learned like the mind-body connection, and meditation and fitness, trying to talk about like your mind and body are supposed to work in sync, not in opposition to one another. Like that's how nature works. That's how the body and the mind are supposed to work. And people just like, again, without doing any math, without looking at any facts, any kind of science or reality, and they'll basically just in their head, just make up whatever they want, period. I mean, it was just like, oh my God, it was like, so I never imagined.
I think for a lot of folks, there's never been a suggestion of another way. Well, what I experienced was I grew up in a neighborhood in East San Jose, what was one of the worst neighborhoods in that area. And so I grew up in like an apartment complex. It was a HUD project, actually. A HUD project kind of gone wrong. And so a lot of the kids I grew up with wound up being gangsters in life. And I knew it when we were young. These guys are going down a path that's going to lead them towards the gang life. And so I was always kind of off doing my own thing. And what happened to me was I joined this volunteer service, and I went across the country, and I wound up in Pennsylvania. And I was shocked out there. It was like I would see homes that were kind of like Leave It to Beaver, where, there's a mother and the father's father lives next door, and he helped, the dad helped the son build the house, and, the cousins come over every Saturday night for dinner, and they all have a Christian dinner together. And I was shocked. The neighborhoods I grew up in is like alcoholic parents beating their children, and police showing up, and all kinds of nasty stuff happening from week to week around the apartments in my neighborhood. And I remember coming back and just being shocked by the sound. You could hear sirens and shots at night, and out in Pennsylvania, it was like complete silence. It was like this total different environment. So I got to kind of see like, oh, wow. Not everybody lives like that, What a difference it is for people that are growing up in a nurturing environment. And like you said, like the garden, right? It takes a lot. You have to take care of the soil. You have to water. You have to put them in the ground at the right time, and clean away the weeds, as opposed to someone who just leaves their backyard wild and doesn't do anything. And it's just throw a tire back there, and, what a different environment that is. And then to put children in these bad environments. And there's no quick way to change it. Like there's no overnight solution, because in these areas like I'm describing, I remember coming back to East San Jose, and the guys I were my friends as kids. We were playing soccer together. Now they were grown up gangsters and had a tattoo on their neck. And they were like tripping out when they saw me. They're like, "Whoa, where'd you go?" You know, they couldn't believe that I'd been across the country. That just seemed impossible to them. Like, how could you leave? You know, to them, they're just stuck in that zone, in that place. And
Can
I
you
think big
can you
cities are
name
like that. They trap people, right?
the name of the volunteer service? Can you name what it was?
It's called the Brethren Volunteer Service. It was a Church of the Brethren,
Oh
what I
wow,
was involved
cool.
with back then. And apparently, the Peace Corps was modeled off of the Brethren Volunteers
Oh
Service
wow.
thing. Yeah, it was a pretty cool experience. You
How
know,
old were you?
I was 19, 18, 19. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, that was something else. And you know, it's the kind of thing, if every kid had experiences like that, an opportunity to see a different part of the world and, you know, go outdoors, you know, see what it's like to live somewhere in nature, you know, what a different world that would open up for kids, you know?
Exactly.
And I've seen that too, because I used to do some outdoor recreation kind of programs like ropes training and stuff, where you'd see kids from a city out in the outdoors and they were like, they'd never seen this before, you know? You could be grow up in a city like New York or Los Angeles and it's just as far as the eye can see city
Yeah.
and all they ever knew was walls at their back, you know, and the fear of
Or
the
prison.
police, right?
Yeah, it's really sad. Can I ask you, so like, so it was volunteer, so you didn't get paid,
Right. Yeah, it was I got like a stipend of like $30 a month or something.
and you're right, and your parents were okay with that.
Yeah,
Like,
it was something I wanted to do and they were all for it. Yeah.
oh, so good for them. Like, because the issue of money, like I always, want to bring up the issue of money because that is always like a big problem for so many people. Like they feel, what again, like my mother couldn't wait for me to get a job. I mean, it was just like, get a job, like get, money. I mean, I might not have
Like the
been getting,
pressure was there from the beginning, huh?
yeah, it's like, you're your health and development get just completely skipped over. I mean, again, just imagine, like it blows my mind how much the family is the micro of the macro. I mean, people get really hung up on talking about everything at the macro level, the corporations and they're poisoning us. There are two movies about DuPont poisoning the world with PFOA in West Parkersburg, Virginia, the Dark Water film, and another documentary called The Devil We Know, which was on Netflix some time ago. And but people never think like the family system, at least in my experience, functioned exactly the opposite. I mean, exactly the same. I mean, it functions exactly the same. And like the adults in the family or neighbors and relatives, they do to the vulnerable the same thing that the system does to them. And like, instead of them pushing back, instead of them fighting back and not allowing it to happen to them, they accept it like it's normal and then teach their kids to take and tolerate the same kind of abuses, and it's just like, what was I going to say? I know I have like all these thoughts in my mind as we're speaking. And
You know, I like what you're getting into because it's part of what I try to do with this podcast is try to make the point that the change that we want to see in the world is available. You know, it is something that we can tap into and there are things we can do on a day-to-day basis. In fact, that's cool. I'm wearing my direct action shirt.
yeah, I saw the
Direct action, you know, over political crusading. Politics aren't going to get us anywhere. We could talk
and
all
neither
day
is
about these
money.
stupid
Neither,
talking heads on TV, but what we can do is start changing our behaviors in day-to-day life and stop accepting these kind of fake religions and this way of treating one another as if it doesn't matter, as if we're not valuable, as if our right to make decisions isn't of more value than anything else. And so that's kind of like what I'm trying to get at is get at these core principles and talk with people like you and people that might be listening about what can we do in our personal lives to make a difference in this effed up world.
One thing that I made a commitment, like literally decades ago, that I was always going to put health and fitness first and nature first. I like by the early 80s, I guess it had to be, when you're getting older and you got to get a job and make money and all of this stuff. I was adamant about, health and fitness. I really needed to take care of my health because I felt so battered, like psychologically. My health psychologically like took such a toll, when I was young, that I had to make my health a priority. And I could feel how difficult it was, like the more I tried to take care of my health or understand health or find help for your health, it was, it was always hard to have money. Like money was always like, you always had to give up health. You always had to kind of put that stuff on the back burner, to go out and make money. And, and I'm like, wait a minute, like I have to pay attention to my health. Like, I'm like, like really, I was like suffering, to just, put it honestly. And I was gonna like do nothing was going to keep me from studying and learning about child abuse and the family system and how healthy relationships was supposed to work. And then I'm trying to figure out, but like, these things are all messed up and polluted and damaged because of money, because all people do is like put money first and neglect all of these things. So how can you make money kind of doing these things? It was, it became so obvious that, health and money were complete opposites, because the more I made it a commitment to do health and fitness, the more poor I ended up becoming. And,
it's like the values of these kind of Satanists and people that are in power in the world. We've created a filtering system that puts the psychopaths in the position of making decisions, right? And so they're making decisions that choose non-human activities over human activities, and they put value on those things. So that reflects down into our lives in so many ways, where the money is always a reflection of value, right? And what's valued in our society, not being human, not being healthy. What's valued is serving obediently your masters.
Exactly.
And that's what people are having trouble seeing and they don't like to hear. But when you get around that corner, it actually gives you a lot of freedom to recognize that's the dynamic that's going on, because then you can start chipping away at it and finding ways to make yourself more free. Don't fall in their traps, right?
So that's what I'm saying. Like it became clear, like the reason why it was the same reason why I got into fitness, because like I was always, like going according to like alignment and what the laws of physics said. And, like when you do things like work out, exercise, weight train, go running or whatever it is that you're doing, you're having this experience with the laws of nature, with the laws of physics. It's like, when we go see a sporting event, we go watch, sports teams score goals, like they're aligning with physics. Like when you watch the Olympics or when you watch people surf or bowling, whatever the heck it is, they're aligning with the laws of physics. And we celebrate these people when they, when Tiger Woods, gets the golf ball in the hole, and when this baseball team or football team or surfer or Olympic athlete or whatever it is, that's how our monetary system should function. It should be aligned with the laws of nature, not the complete opposite. Like it should be and is a disease by the fact that people can actually profit by doing harm, by screwing other people over, enslaving people, and harming the earth. And then we're going to chase money and think that money has value when people make it and it's literally created by doing so much destruction. That's the exact opposite of what, like, athletes do, or what you do when you engage with the laws of nature. I mean, like, that was so simple. I felt like, for me to figure out, like, when I was young, I'm like, well, wait a minute, like, this is what natural law says. This is what happens when I exercise. I'm aligning with, if I put too much weight on my, whatever exercise, like, that's not going to help me. Like, that's going to harm. It was about finding the right amount of stress. Like, was so determined to, like, get to the answers, because, like, oh, like, abuse is good for you. They tried to sell you this lie that abuse was good for you, that these adverse childhoods were good for you. Like, they were going to somehow, make you, like, a more, like, appreciative person or something. And then I would go exercise and be like, no, wait a minute. Because it was obvious that we were living in a digging into the muscle and bone society, not a building muscle society, And so, by working out and exercising, like, I was teaching myself, like, it's the right amount of stress and exercise and pushing your body that helps your body to get stronger, that helps your body to be built up. Anything more than that is going to tear it down. It's going to break you. I mean, like, people, they would just make up this stuff. Like, and I was like, no, I went straight to the source. Like, I was, like, reading and studying and exercising and just going within and really putting the things that people would try to sell you, like, to the test. And I was like, that's a lie. If you don't raise kids right, they don't get stronger. Like, they get weaker. You're literally damaging them for life and giving them, like, stresses and traumas that literally will last their lifetime.
So you mean if I gag myself with multiple layers of cloth, that's not going to make me healthier?
See, this is what I mean. It's like I can't believe, like, the level of sanity that we have gotten into, and further away from, nature. And, like, I was so committed to just alignment. The monetary system should be aligned with your health, with nature. I mean, yoga was always something that was really good, that teaches you the right amount of something. Like, it's all about balancing the hard and the soft, like, really pushing up against something, but just so much, as long as you could still take a full deep breath. Like, you're not pushing too hard, you're not being complacent or slacking, but you're not, trying to get too much either. You're doing things nature's way. You're setting the stage so that nature, and the body can then do the rest on its own. And I mean, it's just like, I can't believe that, like, people haven't been learning this stuff.
One thing I've learned too is, I in the last year, I dealt with some periods of time of feeling pretty, like, on the edge of depression or anxious feelings. And luckily, in the last few years, I've picked up some regular workout routines where I don't spend a lot of time working out, but I'm very consistent on what I do. Same time every day. And that has given me leverage against anxiety and depression, because anytime where I start feeling a little bummed, I'm like, yeah, but you got your exercises and you're doing good on that. You're doing really good. And it would give me this extra kind of pat on the back and reminder that, everything might not be perfect, but I feel fucking great. I can get up and do 100 push-ups right now. Most people can't do that, So, and also, if your body's in decent shape, it allows your mind to be able to operate better. And I think a lot of cases and a lot of folks in the world, their minds aren't operating properly. They're really just not even firing correctly. You know,
So
all
yeah,
the pistons aren't hitting.
I guess to answer your question, before, like, how, I mean, I don't think we can really get people to do anything, to be honest. Like, I mean, people are responsible for themselves. And I think that when we do for ourselves, we do for others by taking care of ourselves and just setting an example and being as close to nature as possible, being as close to the body, like just like really listening. I really believe in meditation, just sitting quietly, understanding. Again, none of this stuff is easy by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, I had no choice but to just kind of get into this stuff early, like as a teenager. I mean, just like a long time ago, and it was just obvious. To take care of your body. I mean, your psyche, your self-worth and self-esteem, and to understanding psychological health, to me, is like even way more important than understanding physical health. um like
And like I've noticed, another thing you're doing is you're spending time now, or like creating videos and putting stuff online to help try to explain some of the problems that are going on. And you spend quite a bit of time, I can tell, researching things and understanding what's really going on in the world, and not just reading the headline, but going to the source, like you said before. And I think that's pretty crucial, and it's also very healing. It's a way that I've been dealing with these problems, is by not just complaining about it, but trying to do something about it. And doing something about it in today's world is speaking up, is pointing things out that are hard for people to hear. And so I commend you for your work on that. That's huge.
again, like it became so obvious, like, as I was getting older, like in the 80s, I was already studying, dysfunction, codependency, enabling, terms like adult child and things like that. And I had this stuff in my mind. And I mean, again, it was my priority to be on the lookout for this stuff, like for what was and wasn't dysfunctional. And I could feel it, especially living and growing up here in New York City, um, that this system did not care about what was or wasn't healthy. It was not going to challenge people to be healthier. I mean, I was like committed to trying to teach people what was and wasn't dysfunctional, what was and wasn't codependent or enabling or things like that. Like, I was so about fitness, like fitness, 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 physically, psychologically, and spiritually, and trying to help people to just be stronger on all levels. And I could feel that in order to sell somebody something, like they didn't care, like they weren't going to help you be healthier. Like, the corporations don't care about you being healthy. They want you to be, naive and ignorant and gullible, so that they can sell you something that you don't even need. And I was always thinking about, money and health, money and health. Like what good was having money if you weren't healthy, and you weren't psychologically healthy, if you weren't emotionally, adult and mature enough to handle the money? All you're going to do is use the money to just screw yourself with. Like, you're like so many
What
people
happens to
do.
all the famous actors and musicians? Why do they always die at 30, 40 years old of
Right,
drug overdose? Because they get all this money and all this,
right.
attention, and they just go crazy, right? Either that, or the dark occult has them murdered. I don't know. One of the two.
you know I mean, it's just I don't know. I think I want to get rid of money. I mean, I know people are not going to like that, but people have no idea that money in actuality is debt. I mean, it literally has
Well,
no
in its
value.
current form, I think in a different kind of society we could kind of just imagine and more ideal, perfect way of doing things, we might have some other system of barter or trade.
Yeah, yeah.
I've heard some of, the people that talk about Austrian economics and all that, that there's agorism, there's different ways to where we could use our systems of trade to show value. But the trouble with the way it is now is it's centrally owned. And it's a con game, it's a con shell game, and it doesn't take a whole lot of looking into it to learn about that. There's a lot of information out there. Look back to how the creation of the central banks and Jekyll Island and these type of
Yeah.
things. That's why money's so evil, because right now it's owned by evil people and they're using it as a mechanism to control everybody's mind. I mean,
It's
look
been
at the mind
weaponized.
control pictures right on these bills.
Right. It's totally been weaponized. And the powers that be, they know that people believe that money is wealth and they're gonna, need money. And so, just like the mortgage fraud some years ago, they were saying in that movie The Big Short, it's like, oh, like who doesn't pay their mortgages? So the powers that be,
Yeah, but they all got bailed out. I lost my house.
see,
I had to give it back to the bank after I put my whole life savings into it, and nobody bailed me out. I had to bail me
exactly,
out.
exactly.
But meanwhile, Fannie Mae or whatever these other big companies were, somehow they all got bailed out, right, by the government, which is money they took from me, my hard sweat, work, and labor for all those years while I was busting my ass. They were stealing that money from me, and they use it to pay these rich goons, and I'm left hanging, holding the bag with nothing for my hard work and labor.
Exactly, like you just described the mass abusive family system.
Right?
And right, like that's what, like was my experience since I was
You're
like
just supposed to
6 years.
make the sacrifice, right?
Exactly,
The
like,
innocent.
the pillagers get bailed out, the abusers in power get bailed out, and you're supposed to just, be screwed and be happy like being screwed. I mean, I implore people to study abusive relationships, like read books on abusive relationships. Alice Miller is really good. John Bradshaw was always like one of my favorites. I mean, those are I mean, maybe there are like others. You got to be, I guess, maybe cautious about who you trust, especially today, because everything is so, profitized. Like, there's so many, people that could like write books and you don't even really, they're not that reliable. I did like spirituality and all of this stuff for so long. I stayed at the Omega Institute for Holistic Studies from 2001 until 2004, with all this spiritual stuff and everything. And I already had so much studying and experiences under my belt before I even went there. And a lot of the people in these places, like, a lot of it was all like, love and light and pixie dust and all this stuff. And one thing like, was missing was, really embracing your dark side. And it was very lopsided. They would really kind of be pushing all this, like, I don't know what, like light and love stuff.
Yeah.
And I was always like, give me a break. Like, no, like, you got a right to be angry. You could, you have a right to stand up for yourself. Like, you have a right to, embrace and integrate that other side of yourself. And that was really missing a lot there. And I feel like that's why the world is in such like imbalance. It's like the people are the ones that need to get angrier, not softer. I mean,
Right.
you can
It's
you
like we're
can
lacking honesty, on a very deep level. Like we can't be acting like everything's all good and we're free when we're actually in a state of slavery and children are being abused on a mass scale.
exactly.
It's like you don't laugh and smile when your mom gets killed or a child gets kicked. You know, those should make you angry. Those should make you frustrated. If people aren't coming out of this society feeling mad and frustrated and irritable, then they're not paying attention to what's going on, because there's a lot of fucked up shit going on, and we need to start doing something about it. And so,
Exactly.
you know, I'm glad that you're speaking out and saying the things you're doing. I'm thinking we're kind of getting the end of this particular episode, but I want to continue the conversation with you, because we got a lot more to get into, talking about children and how children need to be treated better. And
Holy moly.
there's
I
a
mean,
lot to be learned there, right?
and you know, again, like listen to your body. I mean, that's like the best thing I could say. It's just like trust your physical and your psychological, and just let yourself feel what the hell you feel, because the
Hmm.
body just doesn't lie, you know. And to hell with like, you know, being nice, and like screw all that shit, man, because the environment is gonna, like, you know, rip us a new one. The environment, when it really has, you know, what is fed up with us, it's not going to be nice, you know. I mean, when you're having a heart attack, your body is going to like let you know in no uncertain terms it's not going to be nice. I mean, I people tried to brainwash me all my life with like, oh, be happy and oh, be positive, and I was like, you know, I was always like, be angry. Like, you know, I used to listen to a lot of heavy metal, like in the 80s. And, you know, I lifted heavy metal and I listened to heavy metal, like all through the 80s you know, the 90s and some into the early 2000s. Because, yeah, like people were always trying to make you feel like your healthy anger, your just anger was a pathology, was, you know, excessive. Like if you weren't walking around, you know, being just nice and a people pleaser like all the time, like, you know, your body was always supposed to have some endless supply of like love for everybody and compassion for everybody, but yet nobody around you had to make any contributions in your direction to make that actually be the case. I mean, people just suck at economics, at accounting. I mean, this is like basic math, you know. You have to contribute to people. You have to, like, you know, be there for people, you know, be good friends to people, listen to people, you know, be there for them, and, you know, and help them, you know, get out of their anger or get out of their sadness, and then they could actually be happy in reality,
Yeah,
you know.
which takes consistent work. You know, it's not easy. You got to show up. You got to be there and listen when
Oh my
someone's
God.
frustrated, and hear all the way through to the end, and not get all triggered yourself, you know. And that's a big part of it, is just learning to be a listener, you know. And that's some way people can practice, you know, today. You know, some of the things we're talking about
Yeah,
is
healthy relationship
start
skills.
treating people like you want to be treated. And that's the simple old golden rule everybody should know. Treat other people the way you want to be treated, and the basis of natural law. And it's really just the basic understanding. What you're saying in so many ways is everything you do does matter. You know, quit acting like you can do whatever you want and it doesn't matter. No, it all matters. It all affects people around you. And when you start doing things that you know are purposeful, whether it be exercising or, you know, talking about a difficult issue and dealing with it and getting it out on the table and getting it over with when it's hard, it's the same thing as working out. It's difficult, it's uncomfortable,
Exactly.
but it's the work that we need to do to get where we want to go, which is a world without so much damn evil.
Yeah, we need to do things the legitimate way. You know, it's not easy to do things nature's way, the legitimate way, but we have to, or we're done. I mean, again, like I worry sometimes, like, I mean, I pray that it's not too late, but I mean, just from my own experiences and just knowing what I know about relationship skills and things like that, I mean, it's like I don't even hear people talking about it. Like I don't even hear people talking about the abusive family system. And the only child abuse that I hear people talk about is child sex trafficking, but not, you know, the abuse in the home, like the home, the family, just doesn't get talked about enough. Now it's vaccines and big pharma and, Bill Gates and, Jeffrey Epstein or the clergy abuse cases, but like never parents. Like, I guess they don't want to offend people, but we have to offend people. You got to get offended. It's got to be uncomfortable, and it's going to be even more uncomfortable now because people waited so damn long. So it's going to hurt like freaking hell.
That might be a good title for this episode. Get uncomfortable, get angry, or something like that.
Feel the burn,
Feel
like
the burn,
they used to say about Bernie Sanders. It's like, see, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's good. Like, people don't know. They just don't know, like, what is good and what isn't good. And they've been avoiding discomfort, avoiding unpleasantries decade after decade. And I'm like, like the firemen that go into the burning house while everybody else is running out. You got to go into discomfort to a point, little by little by little. That's how you get fitter, not just physically, but psychologically. You got to go into uncomfortable truths in order to get mentally sharper and fitter. I mean, it's good. Like, some discomfort is good.
That's good advice.
If people did it decades ago, they might have been able to take it in smaller amounts, but now you're not going to be able to take it in smaller amounts. It's going to be like big freaking chunks of not so fun stuff coming your way.
Well, it's wacky times ahead, but we got a lot of work to do, that's for sure.
Boy.
Thanks so much, Catherine, for meeting with me today and spending this time. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Hopefully some other folks can gain a few things from our conversation, and maybe we'll do it again. Keep going on this.
I hope so. Thank you.
Right on.